Hello there, Stampers. Welcome. This is Lisa with Queen Bee Creations here with our Monday Live. And Monday means we're doing a fun fold. And actually, I've got kind of the same fold, but 3 different ways we can do it. It's going to end up looking the same, almost the same finished product, but there's 3 different ways we can go about doing it. And I'm anxious to show you how it's done. We are going to be using the Winterly Treetops bundle and then the Nests of Winter designer series paper that goes with it. This is one of my favorite designer series papers because the dies actually cut the birds out of the paper. I love it when Stampin' Up does that. And it makes things a whole lot quicker and easier. Of course, the stamps are there if you wanted to stamp them and color them, absolutely. But for me, when I'm going live and showing you guys, it's nice to have them already colored. So let's go ahead and take a look. So here is the card that we are doing. And you can see it's kind of a crisscross card. And I've done it before where it's kind of looked like this from the outside. But when we open up this one, it's going to fold a little differently. So I've done this, like I said, a couple ways before. One of the ways that I've done it is that we can take our trimmer and I'm going to cut or score it both ways at 4 1/4 and then again at 5 1/2 score. And then what I'm going to do is just cut the whole thing overall right down the middle diagonally. So it takes a little bit of finagling, but I can put the tip in the track, top and bottom. And then once I have that centered, I'm going to actually drop the blade in the middle and go up and go down. Didn't quite go all the way through, so I need snips. There we go. Okay, so I just took an 8 1/2 by 11, scored it at 4 1/4 and 5 1/2, and then I cut the whole thing diagonally. Now this is going to give me 2 card bases that I can fold in like this, and it's going to give me, you know, this kind of a, it's not really a crisscross. I guess it's a diagonal gatefold, but that's going to be one way that I've done this card. You know, and just decorated it up. And then another way I've done it is that we can take and once again, take a sheet. I've got Pool Party here, and I'm going to cut it down the middle at 4 1/4. And then I'm going to score at 5 1/2. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the front of my card and I'm going to cut that diagonal. So I'm going to end up with these pieces. And what I can actually do now is that I can decorate this with my designer series paper. It's going to be the same size as our card we're doing now. And this is 3 7/8 by 5 1/8. But we would cut this diagonal, and then you would have to kind of pay attention to how you want it to go. And of course, once we cut this diagonal, we would be using the back half of this instead of the front. It's not going to allow you to do the pattern from the front and still have it right side up. And I'll show you that when we do our next card. But you would just go ahead, put your designer series paper on there, and then you would glue it together. So then it would give you that look, but it wouldn't waste any cardstock whatsoever because you're using the whole base. Okay, so that's 2 ways I've done it in the past. And so I'm going to show you a different way. So congratulations to Laura Kemp for being our winner from Thursday. She won the gift card holder that I did. And so she will be getting one of those in the mail, minus the gift card, but she will get the card. The way she did that was she liked and commented on the video, and her name got entered into a drawing. So go ahead and do that. Excuse me, if you want to get entered into the drawing for this one. Okay, so we're back here at the desk. Now, for today's card, it's going to be a little bit different. So I'm going to start out the same way, and then I'm going to score both directions. I'm going to score at 4 1/4. And then I'm going to score at 5 1/2. And then I'm not going to need this quadrant at all. So I'm going to take this one off. So I'm just going to lay it back in my trimmer. And I'm going to cut along that score line up into the next score line. And then I'm going to do the same thing this direction. Okay, so far, all I did was remove that corner. Okay, the rest of this is still going to stay. But you'll see as I open this up, what I'm going to need to do is go diagonally and cut across that top one. So I'm going to lay that in my trimmer, and I'm going to have the high point up here and the low point down here. So I'm laying the point up here and then the edge of my score line down here. And I'm removing that piece. Okay, the next thing I want to do is I want to score from here down. And now this gets a little tricky. You kind of have to pay attention to what direction you're scoring everything in, because I wasted some cardstock trying to make my stamp bowl because I cut the wrong diagonal. I went the wrong direction and ended up with some scrap paper. So that's why I'm kind of going slow and showing you all the pieces, so you don't end up with them the wrong way like I did for the first one. Okay, so I remove this entire quadrant. And then on the upper one, I cut from the top down to here. So upper left to lower right on the top flap. And then on the flap on the left, I'm going to go the opposite direction. I'm going to go upper right and lower left. Okay, so that's going to make it fold in and do what I call the crisscross. And so this is giving you the same look that other one did, where I'd cut the front off. Only this time they're attached. Okay. So if you're a beginner, you might want to just go with this one here, where I just did 4 1/4 by 11, scored at 5 1/2, and then I cut diagonal. Then I'm going to flip this one this direction. You would put the designer series paper on first, and then you're going to glue them together. Okay, so once you get the designer series paper on, it's going to look like that. Okay, so this one I've actually got landscape, the one we're doing today. This other one is portrait. So this style does work both directions. It just depends on, this designer series paper, the piece I had, the pattern went that direction, whereas this pattern went that direction. So it kind of made the decision for me. Okay, so these pieces I can put off to the side and use on another project, or use them to cut out my circles. So I need, again, the designer series paper is 3 7/8 by 5 1/8. And then I need a piece of white for the inside. And those are 4 by 5 1/4. It's just our standard layer for the inside. And then I die cut some circles So I was using the Spotlight on Nature dies. And I heard kind of a rumor they're talking about getting rid of these, which is a total bummer because I use them a lot. I really like these and I love basic shapes. Basic shapes can be useful with absolutely everything. And it would be a bummer to see them leave. So if you don't have these yet, you want to make sure you grab them, because I don't know if that rumor is true, but if it is, you want to grab them before they're gone because they are fabulous. And then I used, like I said, I used the dies, excuse me, out of our bundle to die cut right out of the paper. So the little die cuts out this guy over here. And then the larger die cuts out the two birds. Okay, so we can run this through the die cutting machine and it's going to cut those off. Now, you'll notice this has his tail missing, and that's okay. Because anytime there's a partial bird or a partial tree or whatever it is I'm working with, and there's just a partial, I tend to use them on the inside and just glue them to an edge. So if I had that bird over here and his tail's hanging off the edge, it doesn't matter that the tail's missing because it's not necessary for the design. So don't throw away these birds on the edges because they can be used for other things. Okay, so I went ahead and I cut those out. So I have several of them over here to play around with. I have my gray granite circle, and then I have one in Pool Party, and then I have one in white. Of course, it has little pieces around the outside edge I'm going to need to pop out. And so that's when the Take Your Pick tool comes in super handy. You may want to put it on the piece of foam that comes with it and use the die roller, or you may want to use the pointy end and just pop these little pieces out. I will also note that I always pop these little pieces that are left over out of the die before I cut again, because just that much cardstock in there will make it so that the next time I go around and cut, that maybe the ones with those pieces in it aren't going to cut all the way through. So I'll kind of hold it up to the light and I'll go, okay, there's a piece of paper there, and I punch all of these out. Because I don't know why, maybe it's just because this little backing is so short that we want it to go all the way through. And that extra cardstock in there is just enough to keep us from getting a really good clean cut the next time around. Okay, so if you're having trouble with these, anything that's got details like that and the little details are not cutting out, make sure that you check your die and find out if there's little pieces in there that might be hindering your cuts. Okay, I'm just checking back through the comments to see if there was any questions. I feel I'm a little scattered today. I'm still having issues with my throat from my procedure almost 2 weeks ago now. And then I came down with a toothache, so my cheek's all puffed up. So I can't get into the dentist until tomorrow. Luckily, I got the regular doctor to give me some antibiotics this weekend. So I'm hoping they kick in before I see the dentist tomorrow afternoon, because last time I had an infection and my cheek was puffed up like this, the infection prevented the numbing agent to work. So I felt them as they worked on that bad tooth. And that was awful. So dentist is bad enough when they numb you up. If the numbing doesn't work, it's like really bad. Okay. So I'm going to take my piece of designer series paper, and then I'm going to take a look at it. And I know that I want the pattern birds on this half. So I know I want to cut from upper right to lower left. And that's going to be important because if I cut the other way, they're not going to fit the way that I want them to. So pay attention to your designer series paper pattern if it's going a certain direction, if it has an orientation to it. If both sides of the paper are just something random like this, then you're golden. It doesn't matter. But when it's a directional pattern, we want to go the right direction. So again, I'm going to lay this in here. I don't like to slide the blade into the points because I've had them kind of smash up the point when I do that. So I will drop the blade in the middle and then go up and go down so that I'm coming into the point, you know, away from it. Does that make sense? Because if this was in here and I was coming down on that point, there's the chance that it would just kind of smash. And cardstock's probably not going to smash as hard, but it did. It gave it a little bit of a something. Whereas if I did it in the middle and went up and went down, I have a nice clean cut. So then I'm going to take liquid glue because I want the time to wiggle it around and make sure I'm in the right spot. And I'm going to go ahead and put that one on. And then, like I said, this one isn't going to fit the same direction over here. So this one's going to need to flip that direction. That's why I'm saying that it's the back side of the paper, because it's not going to work this way. Now, if you had two pieces of the same designer series paper, you could cut one of them from the top right to the lower left, and then cut the other one the opposite direction. So then you would take one from each paper, and then you would have one that had two sets of birds and one that had two sets of the pattern, because they need to go different directions. So you could do that and just have two different cards if you wanted them to match. But I kind of liked the fact that they didn't. I mean, that's one of the beauties of the designer series paper, is that both sides are gorgeous. And sometimes you don't want to bury both sides. You can't decide like which one's prettier, like which one should I keep. So on a card like this, I get to keep both. Okay. For the inside, I'm just going to do a little bit of stamping. So I'm going to come in with my sending thanks and much love, and mine's a little off kinker, so when I go to stamp this, I know I don't want to position it exactly in the middle because there's extra space over here, so I'm going to shift it a little bit. I mean, not too much, but just a little bit, because I'm going to make up for the fact that that's not quite center. Another thing I have done in the past is just trim it down with some paper snips, because that will also do away with getting the extra ink on there. So if you feel confident, if you've been around Stampin' Up! Forever and you remember when we had to cut our stamps out, they didn't come pre-cut, then you might be comfortable just trimming that down and making sure that it was centered. But I'm going to leave it like this. And I'm going to use gray granite. That was one of the colors out of the designer series paper, and one of the cardstock colors I'm using for our circles. Where did I put it? I had it out here. There we go. And I've said before, I try to place my ink pads out there in front of me because when I set my ink pad over here, I have a tendency to lay my arm in it. So I've tried to force myself into a habit of always placing the ink up and away from me so that I don't stick my arm in it. So if you have that issue like I do, that might be a good habit. Okay, and then I'm going to take the Pussy Willows and I'm just going to do a little bit up here. Now, normally I would do them over here because I've got the bird down here, but in the way that this is going to cover up, if I had the Pussy Willows here, they would be visible, and I didn't want them visible. Now, this is going to get covered up by the circles, so I'm okay with that being in the middle, but didn't want something over here. And then, as I said, we can take some of these birds that were on an edge, and I, again, just use the die and cut them out. And then they're going to go down here on the bottom. I'm making sure I'm giving it some glue kind of all over, getting the edges and stuff, but not very much. If you use too much glue on designer series paper, it's going to kind of bubble up on you. It'll warp a little bit, and I don't want it to do that. So I'm being very sparingly, but yet getting the edges. It also might be a time that you would want to maybe put some on there and then move it around with a sponge dauber, or we often forget about this end. Sometimes if you just put a little bit of glue on there, you can use this wedge end to just spread it around so it's evenly spread. So it's got a thinner layer. I'm going to put my layer down with Stampin' Steel. We know that's one of my favorites. And I have not had issues with it because I am very conscious of the fact that this case needs to stay clean, number one. So you don't want any kind of goobers on there because that's going to grab hold of the glue coming out. And then when I roll it, I kind of go over a little bit because there's a string at the end that I want to snap off. I don't know if you can see that. But there was like a snail string that came across, and I want it to snap off and break up here at the tip. If it breaks off further back here, then when I set it down and try to roll, there's not going to be any sticky stuff up here at the tip. So you want to roll it, tilt a little bit, and then snap so that you're breaking off that kind of snail string kind of at the bottom. And I haven't had issues with it. So another tip that I was told, if you do have kind of issues with it, maybe use it on the silicone mat. A lot of people use their silicone mat for all of their gluing needs because it kind of protects your surface because the glue just washes right off of the silicone mat. And then there's also something about the rubbery aspect of it that makes the glue grab better. So there are definite ways to try to fix it if you're having trouble with that glue. But I think it's fabulous, and you don't need very much of it, which is why I find it so much better than some of the other brands of glue, because I don't have to use very much to make it stick, whereas some of the other ones I need to have, you know, a whole lot of it. And if I need to use a whole lot of it, I'm not really saving any money. So this time I'm going to use dimensionals so that I can pop this layer up a little bit. And I've just chosen a few of the different styles of the circle. They all kind of complement one another, which I think is nice. They've got some that match. So if you wanted to nest some of the circles that match, you can do that. Or if you want to mix them up, you can do that as well. Sorry, here they are. So this, has the eyelet, whereas this one has the eyelet, and then that one, and then this one. So you could get a whole nest together using the eyelet or using the dashes or using the solid. But I like to mix it up. I think it's pretty that way. Okay, to adhere this one, I kind of want to pay attention to what's going to hang off, because I want to make sure I'm sticking my adhesive only where it's going to be touching. I don't want adhesive where it's going to hang off the edge, because we don't want it to stick to the other part of the card. We want it to stick where it's overhanging. And then, of course, because it's a circle, I just need to make sure I'm centered, but I don't need to make him straight, because I can spin the circle to make that straight. And then I'm ready to stick it to the front of the card. And I want to center it kind of all over of the card front. And if you are not comfortable figuring out where you could stick your adhesive, just take a little pencil and draw a line. And then when you add your adhesive, just keep it to that side of the line. And because the lines are so skinny, you can even kind of match it up and bury it just a touch so you can't see it. Or you can go back and, excuse me, erase it with the eraser. But there we go. There is today's card. So I hope you like the design and that you give it a try. As I said, these are the kind of more advanced, and there are those other ones that you can use if you wanted to simplify it a little bit, but it would work together kind of the same way. You could decorate it up exactly the same. It would just be the closure that would be different. Okay, so thank you for joining me today. I'm not seeing questions yet. Melanie said she doesn't think she's ever seen the other end of the green glue. It's funny, isn't it? Like we get so used to doing things one way that we forget that other side exists. It reminds me of, what was that, rubber cement? Remember in grade school they had the little, it was like a brown bottle and it had that kind of a tip on the end. That's what it reminds me of. Or maybe rubber cement was the one with the paintbrush. But anyway, it was a glue we had in school that had a tip like that. It came in a little brown bottle. Guess I'm just old. Okay, I don't see any questions. If you did ask a question and I missed it, I apologize. Please feel free to email me or message me on Facebook or YouTube. Any of those options are available. And I would love to hear from you. And I will see you back here on Thursday for more of our Stamping Made Simple. Thanks so much. Bye.